Queen Val'Raka stood at the edge of the battlefield, her armor shining under the twin suns. Her enemies called her a monster. Her people called her a goddess. And she believed both. She had never lost a war, never once retreated. Her voice could silence a room. Her fist could crush steel. She was feared across the stars, not just for her strength, but for her will. But on this day, something went wrong. A trap was set. A fake call for aid lured her army into a narrow valley. As her soldiers marched forward, hidden weapons burst. From the cliffs, explosions shook the ground. Metal tore through flesh. Her warriors screamed and died in fire. Val'Raka roared orders, trying to regroup, but the enemy had planned too well. They wanted her, not just dead, but broken. She led a charge, refusing to show fear. But as she moved forward, the ground beneath her feet exploded. A powerful mind blasted her into the air. She slammed into a sharp rock wall. Pain shot through her body. Her spine cracked. Her legs went numb. She tried to stand, but nothing moved. Her limbs were useless. Blood poured from her mouth. Her guards looked back in panic. One by one, they ran. Some hesitated, but none returned. She lay in the dust, gasping for air, vision blurry. The sky above spun. Her pride kept her silent at first, but the pain grew too sharp. A groan escaped. Her lips, her mighty voice had turned into a whisper. "Cowards," she hissed. "All of you." Footsteps approached. Not enemy boots. Not heavy warrior steps. Soft. Careful. It was the human. Jalen. A slave. Weak. Fragile. Bought from a broken world. He had once been a soldier, but now served as a servant. He cleaned weapons. Polished armor. Delivered meals. She barely noticed him most days. When she did, it was to insult him or throw something at his head. He never spoke back. Never raised his eyes. Now, he stood over her alone. No weapons. No armor. Just his old torn clothes and dirty hands. She looked up at him, rage in her eyes. "Why are you here?" she said through clenched teeth. Jalen didn't answer. He knelt beside her and studied her wounds. His hands hovered, unsure. She tried to push him away, but her arms wouldn't move. "I don't need your help," she spat. But he had already taken off his jacket and placed it under her head. Then he tore strips from his shirt and wrapped them around her bleeding side. His movements were clumsy, but gentle. "Go," she hissed. "Leave me here." He looked at her for a long second, then shook his head. No, it was the first time she had heard his voice. Soft, steady, and strange. "I will not leave you." She blinked. Not from pain, but from confusion. "Why?" she asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached down, slid his arms under her body, and slowly lifted her. She grunted in pain. Her body burned with every breath. Her pride screamed louder than her wounds. "Put me down," she growled. But he didn't. He held her tighter, adjusting her weight, then began walking. She tried to look around. Smoke rose from the battlefield. Bodies lay scattered. No allies in sight. Only Jalen. Only the human. She had always thought of him as a bug beneath her boot. Now he carried her like she weighed nothing. "How far can you walk?" she muttered, her voice weak. "As far as needed," he said. They entered the edge of the forest. Shadows fell on them. The sun disappeared behind the tall, alien trees. Strange sounds echoed around them. Creatures, hungry and wild. He stopped under a thick tree and gently lowered her beside the roots. He searched for water and returned with wet leaves. He dripped the water into her dry mouth. She hated the way she needed it. Hated how good it felt. As night fell, he started a small fire with 2 rocks and dry sticks. He sat beside her, keeping watch. "Sleep," he said. She stared at him for a long moment. "You don't even like me," she said. He looked into the fire. "No, but I don't hate you either." She turned her face away. She hated how soft his voice was, how steady his hands were, how he didn't ask anything from her. No power. No thanks. Just kindness. Her eyes began to close. Exhaustion pulled her under. Before she slept, she whispered one last word. "Why?" But the answer came later. Much later. When she was strong again. When the world saw her rise not with rage, but with something stronger. Because sometimes, the strongest hands are the ones that lift you when you expect to be left behind. The slave's choice. The forest was thick and wild. Sharp vines hung from twisted trees, and strange glowing eyes watched from the darkness. Jalen had no map, no weapon, and no plan. only the half-conscious queen in his arms and the fire of one choice burning in his heart. He could leave her now, let her die quietly beneath the stars. No one would question it. She had treated him like filth since the day he was taken. She didn't even know his full name. But something inside him refused to walk away. He remembered the sound of her body hitting the rocks, the way her voice, once so proud, trembled in pain. She was powerful once. Now, she was broken. And though she was cruel, she was still alive. And he could not let her die like this. He shifted her weight gently and pushed forward through the undergrowth. Her head rested against his chest, her breath shallow. Her face was pale, her eyes shut tight, fighting pain in silence. Even now, her pride was strong. Each step hurt Jalen's back. The queen's armor, though cracked and dented, was still heavy. But he didn't stop. He walked for hours. He avoided trails. He moved through thick branches. His arms shook, his feet bled, but he never once put her down. She stirred once. "Why still here?" She whispered weakly. Jalen didn't answer, because he didn't have an answer that made sense. He just knew it was right. At last, he found a hollow space between two massive trees. There was enough shelter from wind and rain. He gently laid her down and checked her pulse. Still beating, weak, but steady. He took off his outer shirt and placed it over her. The night air was growing cold. Then he collapsed to his knees, breathing hard. The stars peeked through the canopy above. Alien insects chirped and clicked in the shadows. Jalen pulled a sharp rock from the dirt and began carving at dry bark, trying to make fire. It took him over an hour, but finally, a small flame danced to life. He sat beside it and looked at her again. Even broken, she looked powerful. Her silver hair was tangled and blood-soaked, but her face was strong, her jaw clenched, her brow still furrowed with pride. She was used to commanding armies. Now she couldn't move a finger. He tore more strips from his clothes and cleaned her wounds. He found a leaf that oozed blue sap and gently rubbed it across her bruised leg. She didn't speak again. By morning, her fever had risen. Jalen soaked more cloth in cool water and placed it on her head. As the sun lit the forest, her eyes fluttered open. She stared at him, confused. "You're still here," she said, voice rasping. He nodded. "Why?" He stared into her eyes. "Because you didn't deserve to die like that," he replied quietly. "Not helpless. Not alone." She blinked. Not from pain, but from shock. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not with pity, not with fear. Just honesty. "I crushed your kind," she whispered. "I remember," he said. "But I'm not like you." For the first time, silence fell between them. Not the cold silence of hate, but the strange stillness of something changing. Later that day, he carried her again. They had to move. She was still too weak to walk. She hated it. Hated being lifted, like a wounded animal. Hated the way she depended on him. But she said nothing. For the first time in her life, Queen Val'Raka listened. She watched how carefully he stepped, how he flinched at every sound. Alert, protecting her. He was no longer a slave in her eyes. He was something else. She didn't have a word for it. Not yet. But it was the beginning of something neither of them could name. And something no one could ever expect. That a queen's fall had brought a new path. And it started with the one man she had never cared to notice, until now. Broken body. Broken pride. Queen Val'Raka opened her eyes to the soft crackling of fire and the faint scent of crushed leaves. Her body refused to move. The pain was deep, sharp, and constant. Her legs still had no feeling. Her arms trembled if she tried to lift even a finger. She was alive, but she wished she wasn't. Once her voice could silence 1,000 warriors. Now, it couldn't even call for water. And yet, water came. The human, Jalen, held a smooth stone leaf, gently tipping cool drops to her dry lips. She drank slowly, her pride aching more than her wounds. She wanted to scream at him, order him to stop, remind him who she was. But the words caught in her throat. What was left to command? She was not the queen now. She was just a body in the dirt. The sun filtered through the forest, dancing over her battered armor. Her skin was bruised, her bones cracked. Even her long hair, once kept in perfect braids, was a dirty mess clinging to her face, and he had seen it all. The humiliation stung worse than the broken ribs. That night, she tried to crawl away. It was pathetic. She dug her elbows into the soil and dragged herself just 2 body lengths before collapsing. Her vision blurred. Her breath became shallow. She cursed under her breath, biting back a scream. But before the darkness swallowed her, strong arms lifted her again, but he said nothing. Just laid her gently back and covered her with what was left of his blanket. She turned her face away from him, hot shame rising to her cheeks. "You're not my guard," she muttered. "No," he said calmly, placing a wet cloth on her forehead. "But you're still someone." "Someone," she scoffed. "I'm the supreme blade of Raganak. I led 5,000 into battle, and now I can't even roll over." His voice didn't change. "You're hurt. That doesn't make you nothing." She closed her eyes. She hated him for saying that, because a part of her wanted to believe it. The next morning, she woke to the sound of him singing. Not a song of her people, not a chant of war, a soft tune. Old, human. She didn't understand the words, but the tone calmed her chest. For a moment, she forgot she was wounded. She forgot the forest, the battlefield, the betrayal. For just one moment, she wasn't a queen or a warrior. She was just a being in pain, listening to someone who didn't want anything from her. When he noticed her eyes open, he stopped singing. "Keep going," she said without thinking. He smiled slightly. "Didn't think you were the type to enjoy music." "I'm not," she snapped. But it was tolerable. He raised an eyebrow but said nothing. The day passed slowly. He fed her soft fruits and kept her warm. He searched for herbs, crushed them with stones, and rubbed the mixture on her wounds. Some pain faded. Her breathing grew easier. When he returned with firewood that evening, she watched him. His back was scratched. His arms were bruised. His feet bare. He was suffering too, but he never once looked tired. "Why didn't you run?" she asked suddenly. He didn't look at her as he replied. "Because I didn't want to. Even after what I did to your people." He paused, then met her eyes. "You didn't do it to me." She had no answer to that. That night, she whispered his name for the first time, not as a command, but softly. "Jalen." He looked over. "Thank you." His eyes widened. "I never thought I'd hear that from you." She looked away, embarrassed. "I never thought I'd say it." And in the silence that followed, something new was born. Not friendship, not yet, but respect. A crack in the wall she had built around herself. Her body was still broken, but maybe her heart could start to heal. Enemies in the shadows. The forest was never truly silent. Even in the deep hours of night, when the moons were high and the fire burned low, something always moved beyond the trees. Eyes blinked in the dark. Claws scraped bark. The wind carried whispers, not of ghosts, but of predators waiting for weakness. Jalen knew it. He heard it, felt it, but he never showed fear. He sat beside Queen Val'Raka like a stone statue, alert and watchful. His body was tired. His wounds ached. But he didn't rest. Not while she was helpless, and Val'Raka saw everything. She had once called him useless, weak, slow. Now, she watched the way he moved, the way he listened to the night, and the way he used broken tech and forest scraps to keep them hidden. He was no longer a slave. He was a soldier again. Something stirred above. A mechanical hum echoed faintly. Jalen's eyes snapped upward. He grabbed a sharp stick and threw it toward the thick canopy that a tracker drone shattered into sparks before. It could scan them. Val'Raka's breath caught. That was not the action of a servant. That was military grade, she whispered. "You knew it." He nodded. "I've seen those before." She stared at him. "You were trained." He didn't answer, but she could tell. He wasn't just any prisoner. Someone had once trusted him with war. She looked down at her own body, still half paralyzed, and clenched her jaw. "Why didn't you tell me?" "You never asked," he said. She hated how calm he was. How right he sounded. Later, as they moved again, Jalen carrying her through thick brush, they heard shouting. Distant but growing closer. Scavengers. Enemy hunters. Not looking to rescue, but to collect her head as a trophy. Her eyes flashed with fury. "They want my corpse." Jalen didn't answer. He ducked behind a fallen tree and gently set her down. Then he picked up a broken metal panel he had kept since the battlefield. Using a sharp rock, he carved a message into it in alien script. She frowned. "What are you doing?" "Sending them in the wrong direction." He tied the panel to a broken spear, planted it near a trail, and lit a small fire near it to attract attention. Then he carried her in the opposite direction. As they moved farther from the danger, her chest burned, not from pain, but from confusion. Every action he took was for her. No hesitation, no anger, just duty. You could leave, she said. They wouldn't follow you. I know, but you won't. No, she looked away, heart heavy. I don't understand you. You don't need to. That night, they found shelter in a cave hidden behind thick vines. The entrance was narrow, the inside cold, but safety. He laid her down gently and rubbed warmth into her hands. Her fingers were finally beginning to twitch. It was small, but it meant healing. Jalen saw it too. He smiled. You'll walk again, he said quietly. She closed her eyes. You speak like you believe in me. I do. Her voice cracked. Even after I treated you like garbage? You were angry, lost, but not evil. She felt something break inside her, something old and sharp. No one had ever spoken to her like this. Not without fear, not without begging, only truth. She turned her face to him and said the words she never thought she would speak. I don't deserve your help. He gave her a tired smile. That's not for you to decide. Outside, the shadows circled. Danger was still hunting, but inside the cave, something stronger than fear began to grow. Trust. The healing begins. Rain poured from the sky, like the jungle itself was weeping. Thunder rolled overhead, and cold wind cut through the trees like sharp knives. But deep inside the hidden cave, a small fire glowed. Its warmth flickered over two silent figures, one broken, the other exhausted. Queen Val'Raka lay still, her breath slow, her body wrapped in woven vines and dry cloth. Her armor had been stripped away days ago. Only scars remained now. Scars on her skin and on her pride. She had once walked tall above crowds who knelt to her. Now she couldn't lift her own weight. And yet, every morning, the human returned. With food, with water, with herbs she didn't recognize, but that soothed her pain. Jalen worked quietly. Always, he built crude crutches from tree branches and wrapped them with leaves to avoid splinters. He used tech scraps from old crash sites to craft simple tools. He even found a cracked medical scanner. Useless to most, but in his hands, it told him just enough. Her nerves were slowly waking, and so he pushed her. Try moving your toes, he said one morning. She glared at him. I was a queen, not your patient. You were a warrior. Act like it, he replied. For a moment, her old rage burned in her eyes. But she didn't argue. She tried, and her toe twitched. Only once, but it moved. He smiled. She didn't. Not yet. But inside, something flickered. Hope. As days passed, her fingers followed. Then her hand. She could sit up with his help. Then alone. Each movement brought pain, but also power. She was taking her body back. Night. She began asking questions. Why do you know these herbs? I fought on a forest world once. We had nothing but plants. Who trained you? No one important. Then how do you survive so easily? He looked at her and said, because I had no choice. She went quiet. That answer she understood. She too had once been thrown into war as a girl with no choice. They were not so different after all. One evening, she tried standing. Jalen stood close, but didn't touch her. She rose slowly. Her legs shook. She nearly fell, but she didn't. She stood. For the first time in weeks, she looked down at him, breathless. I'm up. He nodded. You are. She stared at her trembling hands. I thought I would never feel them again. You believed wrong, he said softly. You're stronger than you think. Something in her chest tightened. His words used to annoy her. Now they reached her. She turned away, struggling to hide the emotion in her eyes. That night, as the wind howled outside, she whispered something she'd never said before, not to anyone. I was afraid, she admitted. Jalen didn't respond right away. Then he said, so was I. She looked at him. Really looked you? He nodded. Not of the forest. Not of dying. I was afraid. You'd never see me as more than a tool. She swallowed hard. I see you now, she said. The silence that followed was not heavy. It was warm, real. Outside, the storm still raged, but inside the cave, two souls, once queen and slave, sat together in a quiet peace, not healed completely, but healing. And that was something neither of them had ever known. The rescue that changed everything. The forest had turned against them. Smoke curled through the trees. Distant shouts echoed from the cliffs. The scavenger clan had found their trail. And they weren't just hunting Val'Raka. They were hunting her alive. A crippled queen was worth more than a dead one. She could be paraded, shamed, sold. That humiliation was the real prize. Val'Raka gritted her teeth as Jalen helped her. To her feet. Her legs shook. Every step was agony. But she walked now. Not fast, not strong, but she walked. She couldn't outrun death, but she could face it. Still, Jalen didn't plan to let it catch her. "We don't have much time," he said, checking the beacon strapped to his arm. A red light blinked faintly. "I boosted the signal. A rescue craft should see it." She nodded. "How long?" "Too long." She looked back at the jungle. Shadows moved, fast and many. "They'll surround us before it gets here." "I know." Jalen scanned the rocky slope ahead. "But if we reach that ridge, we might survive long enough." She turned to him. "Then go. Alone. You can make it faster without me." He didn't answer. Instead, he crouched, wrapped one arm behind her knees, the other under her back, and lifted her again. She gasped. "Put me down. I can walk." "Not fast enough," he said firmly. "And I'm not leaving you." His grip was strong. His face focused. He climbed. Up steep rock. Through clawing vines. Over roots that tried to trip him. His breaths grew louder, sharper, but he never stopped. Behind them, blaster fire cracked. Val'Raka looked over his shoulder and saw shapes. Hunters, emerging. From the trees. Ugly masks. Rusted weapons. One raised a rifle. "No," she cried, trying to warn him. But before she could speak again, pain exploded in Jalen's shoulder. He stumbled. Blood bloomed across his back. She screamed. "You're hit." He kept going. Another blast. Sparks flew beside them. He slipped once, caught himself, then pushed harder. "You're bleeding," she shouted. "I'll bleed later," he growled. The ridge neared. Above it, the clouds opened, and through the smoke, a flash of metal appeared. A ship. One of hers. The signal had worked. She turned her head and saw the hunters behind them slowing. Some raised their rifles. Others hesitated. Too late. The rescue ship's guns lit the sky. Blue fire rained down. Trees exploded. Hunters scattered, screaming. Jalen reached the top of the ridge and collapsed. Still holding her. Still shielding her. The ship landed. Elite guards in black armor rushed forward. Weapons ready. They surrounded Jalen. One pointed a rifle at his head. "Drop the queen." "Step back." Val'Raka raised a hand, weak but firm. "Touch him, and I'll rip your lungs out," she snarled. The soldiers froze. One lowered his weapon. "He's a slave." "He is not," she said, voice shaking with fury. "He saved your queen. Where were you?" No one answered. She looked down at Jalen. Blood ran down his back, but he was conscious and smiling. "You made it," he whispered. She nodded. "We made it." The guards moved to help, but she waved them away. She held Jalen's hand in front of all of them and didn't let go. Not for power, not for duty, but for the truth. He was no longer beneath her. He was beside her, and for the first time, she wanted the whole galaxy to see it. The queen who knelt the grand halls of the warship were silent. Not out of respect, out of confusion. The fierce Queen Val'Raka, once carried like a god, once feared across empires, returned not on a throne, not in glory, but walking slowly. Beside a bloodied human. Her armor was gone, her crown missing, her body wrapped in bandages and healing cloth. But she walked, and that, to her people, was the miracle. She didn't enter with trumpets. No fanfare, no speech, only silence. Jalen limped beside her, his shoulders still wrapped, his shirt stained red. Soldiers stared at him, shocked. Some sneered. Others whispered. A slave walking beside the queen, breathing her air? But Val'Raka didn't care. At the center of the hall, her high council waited. 10 powerful leaders who had ruled in her absence. They stood in robes, proud and polished, ready to hear her commands. Instead, they watched her stop in front of them and do something unthinkable. She turned to Jalen and dropped to one knee. The sound of her knee hitting the metal floor echoed through the chamber like thunder. Gasps spread like wildfire. One counselor stepped forward in shock. "My queen, what are you doing?" She raised her voice, not loud, not violent, but final. "This man is the reason I stand here. The reason I breathe. The reason your queen is not rotting in a jungle pit. When my generals fled, when my army fell, when my body gave up, this human carried me." She turned to face her people. "And I want the galaxy to remember this. I was saved not by a fleet, not by a weapon, but by a man I once called nothing. The room fell to silence. The counselor frowned. But he was your property. A human. He is not property. She cut in, voice like steel. Not anymore. He is the reason your queen is alive. She stood again, slowly, painfully, but with pride. She turned to Jalen. You gave me back my life, she said, her voice softer now. I cannot repay that. Jalen looked around at the alien eyes watching him. He didn't know what to say. No one had ever spoken for him, especially not like this. I wasn't trying to change anything, he said. I just couldn't walk away. She smiled, just a little. And I can't walk past you ever again. She reached for his hand, not to command, not to drag, but to hold. He took it, and suddenly, the galaxy had a new story to tell. Not of a queen who ruled with fear, but of a queen who learned what strength really meant, not in battle, but in surrender, not in pride, but in honor. The queen who once knelt for no one, now knelt for the one she once called worthless. And in doing so, she became greater than ever before. You said, I want to put